Namaskar, Adab, hello, and welcome to this segment of MythoLogical presented by Breakfast at Cinema, in which we will take a look at some of Hindi cinema's many attempts to bring to the big screen stories we have grown up listening to and those we go back to time and again throughout our lives. Mythology has always influenced cinema deeply. What, with various plot templates it provides, the fact that these stories are already popular with the masses, and the scope for presenting grandeur and divinity while exploring new filmmaking technologies. For this event, we are focusing on mythology in Hindi cinema with four landmark films, mythology's influence on them, and their legacies. Let us begin by talking about how mythology birthed Indian cinema. We have to talk about India's first film itself, Raja Harishchandra, which set the wheels in motion for India to become one of the largest film producing nations in the world. The birth of Indian cinema and mythologies of this land are intricately connected with each other. Raja Harishchandra by Dhundiraj Govind Phalke, or Dada Saheb Phalke as he is popularly known, influenced other film producers and directors to look into India's vast rich treasure of stories, legends, mythology, folklore, and history to turn into films. Also known as the father of Indian cinema, Dadasaheb Phalke was inspired by the movie The Life of Christ by Alice Guy Blaché, made in 1906, which he watched with his family in Bombay. Inspired by it to make his own film, he began to study and understand what makes a successful film. He was initially interested in turning Surabai Chi Kahani, or the story of Sura or alcohol, into his first cinema project because it delved into alcoholism and its effects. But upon watching some of the Western films being screened in Bombay, he observed that mystery and romance were the genres that the audiences preferred. When he discussed this idea with his family, they suggested to him that a truly original Indian successful film would be the one which would appeal to the middle class and women while putting Indian culture in the limelight. Phalke found substance in this suggestion and he considered several stories from Hindu mythology, like those of Krishna, Savitri Satyavan, and Harishchandra. Those days, Harishchandra was a popular mythical figure on Marathi and Urdu stages. In fact, so popular that children used to reenact scenes they loved when they would get together to play. That and the fact that Phalke's friends jokingly referred to him as Harishchandra for having sold all his belongings in the pursuit of filmmaking led him to choose to tell the story of Raja Harishchandra in his first film. Having been a printer, photographer, and an artist who worked with Raja Ravi Verma and a magician, he drew from his experiences in those jobs while making his films. His vision to bring new and exciting technological developments to India and then connecting the achievement to Indian ethos became an important factor in driving his filming decisions. Raja Harishchandra tells the story of a devout king who, while on a hunting expedition with his son Rohitashva, unintentionally disturbs sage Vishwamitra during a particularly important yagya, and then offers the furious sage his kingdom to placate him. The royal family then goes into exile where they face one problem after another, forcing Raja Harishchandra to constantly choose between his duty and promises to his subjects and his personal happiness. This continues until at a critical point of no return, Lord Shiva appears and sage Vishwamitra reveals that it was all a test of the king's character. The family is given back their kingdom and blessed with prosperous rule. In the initial days of camera and photography, there was a common superstition among the masses that the camera captured the souls of those whose pictures it took. Then there were cultural taboos associated with the film, which is why men had to act as women. Despite it all, there were serpentine queues outside Coronation Theatre in Bombay. People across age brackets and social groups bought tickets and thronged the theatre to watch with reverence the story of the righteous fulfillment of a Raja's duty. Of course, watching a film about a legendary human king who impresses sages and gods with his character couldn't be bad for them as long as they demonstrated the same strength with their ideals and values. The hugely successful film laid the foundation that led to a spurt in mythology based films, a genre which sustained itself successfully for a few decades, along with social dramas. Not only Dadasaheb Phalke, but many other filmmakers across the country made mythological films as they offered narrative depths, values to be espoused, and easily identifiable characters, relatability with personal experiences. It also affirmed their belief that divine intervention will help the cause of the righteous, a philosophy which influences how most Indians live their lives. The stories were all there, and the question that remained in front of the filmmakers was how to make them production worthy. Access to Hindu gods was a process that had begun a while back with Raja Ravi Verma and his paintings, with Dadasaheb Phalke having assisted Raja Ravi Verma in printing his paintings and making them available at mass levels. Dadasaheb Phalke's foray in mythology further brought these gods closer to people. Stories of people taking Aarti ki thali and coconuts, awaiting the arrival of Lord Shiva to bless the family of Harishchandra after being tested, are now the stuff legends are made of. His perseverant belief in the Almighty in the face of the tragedy and misfortune that they are facing, which leads eventually to a happy ending, became an idea with which Indians living under the dominion of a foreign occupier could easily identify with. Unfortunately, the reels of most of Dadasaheb Phalke's films made between 1913 and 1917 are lost. But we can gauge that the popularity of Raja Harishchandra was so huge that he remade his own film as Satyavadi Raja Harishchandra in 1917. The intertitles of the original were in English and Hindi, but the costumes were tending more towards Peshwai style. And yet, people across the country didn't care. They were just awestruck by a beloved tale being retold in a format they had never imagined before. In fact, the movie was so popular, it was made by several other filmmakers, sometimes more than once, over the next decade. Dadasaheb Phalke's connection with mythologies continued throughout his life as he directed films like Mohini Bhasmasur, Kaliya Mardan, and Satyavan Savitri. And when he eventually left the film industry to settle in the holy city of Kashi, he continued to work in the space of theatre while exploring the themes he had been chasing all his life. His influences on film directors and producers such as Sohrab Modi, R. Nataraj Mudliar, Jamshedji Framji Madan, Vijay Bhatt, Raghupati Venkaiah Naidu, V. Shantaram, Damle and Fateh and many more led to a steady flow of films that brought stories of Hindu mythology and sometimes from other mythologies to large audiences in the audiovisual format, which was earlier reserved only for the stage and travelling troupes performing local dance dramas. What the mythologicals of the earliest decades of Indian cinema did was to reintroduce to the people the values our cultures held dear, like sacrifice and duty in Raja Harishchandra, courage in Kaliya Mardan, victory of good over evil in almost all of them. Introduce them to what constitutes good governance and what they should expect from their rulers, like in Ram Rajya, and so on. A few years later, even German filmmaker Franz Osten, who worked extensively with Himanshu Rai and Devika Rani, explored Indian mythology in films like A Throw of Dice and Prem Sannyas. Films were scrutinized heavily then because the British feared they would provoke more people to join the freedom movement, as they understood that the medium was highly influential. But while the British authorities imagined mythologicals to be straight retellings from our ancient scriptures and literatures, they discounted how they could play a role in shaping minds and orienting them towards nation building. It was natural then that the early filmmakers in India explored stories and made movies steeped in the essential values of truth, justice, and beauty, or Satyam Shivam Sundaram, which avoided any direct conflict with authorities but propagated ideals that fueled the Indian struggle for independence. It fanned the fire of nationalism, reawakened the pride Indians felt for their heritage, and gave them a vision of a truly independent, prosperous India worth fighting for.